करें सर शुरू with your permission?
करें सर?
डीन साहब से परमिशन जरूरी है सर.
हैं?
परमिशन फ्रॉम डीन इज मैंडेटरी.
हाँ डीन साहब.
तिवारी और डीन से परमिशन ले लीजिए.
यस सर, डॉक्टर तिवारी साहब से और डीन साहब से. सर तिवारी साहब, मिस्टर प्रेसिडेंट.
प्रेसिडेंट से लीजिए पहले तो परमिशन आप.
प्रेसिडेंट, कैन वी स्टार्ट द मीटिंग?
लेट्स गो. यस.
थैंक यू सर. थैंक यू.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, friends. I extend a very warm welcome to you on behalf of Scientific Committee Society Kota, Rajasthan Forum of ICU Fellows, at today's virtual electrolyte symposium, which is being organized under the aegis of Indian College of Physicians, an academic wing of Association of Physicians of India. Scientific Committee Society is organizing academic programs very regularly. We organized a series of scientific talks during last year and this year, covering all important aspects of clinical medicine, including COVID-19, its complications, COVID vaccinations, and others. After a break of almost a month due to severe COVID, we are starting our programs again. We have chosen today's topic, approach and management of hypo and hyponatremia, as it is an important and complex subject and is of paramount importance to all practicing physicians, because we encounter sodium imbalance almost on a daily basis in our clinical practice. I take the privilege to welcome our distinguished guests, the stalwarts of API. I welcome Dr. Y.P. Munjal, sir, Interim Director, PRF, mentor and guide of all of us in API. Dr. B.B. Thakur, one of the senior most and tallest leader of API, my guide. Dr. Kamlesh Tiwari, the popular president of API. Dr. Rajesh Upadhyay, Dean, Indian College of Physicians, who took on himself to revitalize the Indian College of Physicians activities this year. I welcome my most respected leader, mentor and guide, Dr. K.K. Parikh, who is the sole initiator of academic activities in Rajasthan. I extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed speaker of this evening, Dr. Sanjay Pandya, a renowned nephrologist of Rajkot, who has made Save Your Kidney as a mission of his life. I also welcome the panelist of this evening, Dr. N.P. Singh, Member Faculty Council, Dr. Mangesh Tivaskar, the Dynamic Secretary of API, Dr. Anupam Prakash, Member Governing Body. I welcome our chairpersons, Dr. Jyotirmay Paul, the Dynamic Vice Dean of Indian College of Physicians, and my friend, Dr. Palaniappan, Member Governing Body, a very active member from Tamil Nadu. I welcome my friend Dr. G.D. Ramchandani and Dr. Pradyuman Sharma, moderators of this evening. And I welcome all of you friends for sparing your valuable time this evening to join this meet. At the outset, I request Dean ICP Dr. Rajesh Upadhyay for his blessings.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be amongst the stalwarts of API. My warm wishes to Dr. Munjal, who is my mentor and guide, Dr. B.B. Parikh, who is the tallest figure in Rajasthan, Dr. B.B. Thakur, who is one of the original trios of API and has been guiding us very kindly all over these years. Our very popular president, Dr. Kamlesh Tiwari, my friend, Dr. Girish Mathur, and all the others. I would not like to go into the names, but I must just thank each and everyone to be present here on this occasion. I think when the medical institutions have been reeling under the pressure of COVID epidemic and where the educational programs were affected. On the other hand, the API and the ICP, I think we have done an amazing job of imparting knowledge to postgraduates all over the countries. And I really thank the Rajasthan chapter, Bihar chapter, West Bengal, the Northeast, the South Zone, South Mid Zone, everybody getting together on one common mission, that is to impart knowledge to our postgraduate physicians. And I think we have done an exemplary work. And today is another example of the Rajasthan Forum of the Indian Academy. And they are doing a marvelous job. And you can see the very program, management of hyponatremia and hypernatremia, a very important, important area which is seen by all physicians all over the place. So these are all very important, very pertinent, very clinical topics on which we are discussing today. So I extend all my congratulations to the Rajasthan chapter, and I wish that this will be a great experience in learning for all the postgraduates, including ourselves, because we are ones who keep on learning as well with every meeting. Congratulations again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Upadhyay. I now request our energetic and dynamic president, Dr. Kamlesh Tiwari, for his words of blessings.
Thank you, Girish. Good evening to everybody. Respected Dr. Manjal, Professor Thakur, and Dr. K.K. Parikh, my fellow colleagues and guests present here. First of all, I will like to thank the organizers who have invited me on this occasion for this function. Secondly, topic of today is very close to my heart. When I will tell the reason, you people may laugh, but it is a fact that when I was a final year student and MD student, I have read this topic at least 1,000 times, but every time only for 5 minutes. Reason, because at that time I was not knowing what is sodium, what is potassium, what is chloride, and every time I set up my book and went out for walk. But we learn this electrolyte disturbances by our experience and by the guidance of our seniors. But today I'm going to learn by teaching organized by Dr. Girish Mathur and Rajasthan chapter. It is very good. I will like to thank and I will like to bless you for this occasion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now request Dr. B.B. Thakur, sir, past President API, past Dean ICP, for his address.
Thanks, Mathur. At the outset, I bring compliments from Bihar, Muzaffarpur, the city of Lychee, and warm welcome, warm greetings to you all. Mr. President, sir, Dr. कहाँ गया हमारा डीन चला गया क्या राजेश उपाध्याय the dean college of
दिन चला गया सर.
Dr. Munjal, my elder brother, Dr. Mathur, my contemporary, maybe elder to be, my dynamic secretary, our dynamic secretary. Actually, I must congratulate Dr. Tiwari and Dr. Rajesh Upadhyay for making the adversity change to opportunity. As we all know, we are passing through a very bad time, adverse time. Teaching was affected, education was affected, travel was affected, is affected.
I mean, there are many, I won't go into the details of it in the interest of scientific program. So at the outset, I congratulate Dr. Tiwari and Dr. Rajesh Upadhyay for this transferring adversity to opportunity. And I don't mince any word, and I don't hesitate to say that our all brethren in different parts of the country are doing wonderful teaching program. Especially, I will be failing in my duty if I do not mention especially Rajasthan, Bengal, South, under the dynamic leadership of Dr. Parikh, Mathur, Paul, Dr. Palaniappan. Of course, we are also following your footsteps, but I will give more marks to you three and then subsequently to us. And this is what for the API was established. Academics, academics, and academics. So fundamentally, API, you two people and two leaders, and we all are engaged in enlarging the activities of API against all odds. So my most sincere congratulations to all my friends who are doing this commendable job. Not only that, in normal course, we would not have met so frequently, saw us each other so frequently. So that is another opportunity which is given by the virtual platform. As told by Dr. I think Mathur, our dynamic secretary, every minute he's busy in this or that program. So API is doing commendable job. Leadership is commendable. ICP is doing commendable job. I wish us to continue it and educate us. And you see, doctors need education till they do not die or till they do not stop practicing. So I also thank them, everybody of you, to educate me. I always get some education as told by our Honorable President, and I congratulate you all. I congratulate Dr. Mathur and Dr. Parikh. I congratulate Rajasthan chapter as a whole and for this program and especially these two topics. And I wish you a good luck. Jai API, Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir.
I will also like to mention that in this hour of crisis, Rajasthan is in the top.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I now request Chairman, Scientific Committee, past President and past Dean API, my mentor and guide. And these all activities of Rajasthan are his brainchild, Dr. K.K. Parikh, sir.
Thank you, Girish. Good evening, everybody. It's really a great pleasure and a great opportunity for me to welcome all of you to this very important CME program of today on hypo and hypernatremia. Friends, first of all, our honorable chief guest of today is Dr. Y.P. Munjal, our mentor, guide. Dr. B.B. Thakur, the senior most leader of API. Dr. Kamlesh Tiwari, president, very simple and a very good human being. Dr. Upadhyay, who had this idea of disseminating knowledge to all clinicians and especially those who are living at the peripheral areas and all postgraduates. He had a program, he discussed this program with me that he want to disseminate the knowledge to the postgraduate students as well as to the clinicians. So we are running both the programs in Rajasthan, the postgraduate master classes and this CME program for all physicians and clinicians. Dr. Jyotirmay Paul, a vibrant leader of West Bengal. Dr. Palaniappan, dynamic honorary secretary. Mangesh Tivaskar, a wonderful orator. I have just heard him. Dr. MP Singh, Dr. The most important today's speaker, Dr. very popular and a very respected Dr. Sanjay Pandya. And thank you very much for sparing your valuable time. You are a very busy person. Most everybody wants to you as a speaker. And he's a very simple and a very good human being. Our own Dr. Girish Mathur, the architect of all these programs, our dynamic coordinator, Dr. Pradyuman Sharma, who is a very senior API member of Rajasthan, very energetic. Dr. Ramchandani, very enthusiastic and energetic diabetologist of Rajasthan, member governing body. Dr. Puneet Saxena, I'm seeing him. And I hope that we, at least I am 100% sure that we will organize API Conference 2020-22 at Jaipur. And he is the organizing secretary. All my friends of API, Anupam Prakash, very energetic, very enthusiastic. All other delegates who are attending today's webinar, I welcome all of you and extend my sincere thanks to all of you for being in this very important webinar on electrolytes, which we are coming across every day, these problems, and still many times we don't find a solution. So today, as Dr. Tiwari said just now, that he has gone many times for this chapter, but I think by the he was not knowing Dr. Sanjay Pandya before that. Otherwise, he would have not talked like that. Today, I think you will definitely master this chapter with the lecture of Dr. Sanjay Pandya. So thank you very much, everybody. And I don't take much time because the most important is our webinar, our lecture by Dr. Sanjay Pandya. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, sir. I now request our most respected leader, the legendary Dr. Y.P. Munjal, sir, for his pulse of wisdom. Dr. Munjal, sir.
Sir, you need to unmute yourself, sir. Munjal, sir, you need to unmute yourself.
Is that all right now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, absolutely fine.
Dr. Kamlesh Tiwari, our president, Dr. B.B. Thakur, Dr. Parekh, who has been the dean as well as the president of API and gave a new direction along with Dr. Wander. This program was envisioned and was being done by the Bengal chapter of API. From there, the spark came to our dean, and our dean formulated a program which is now running quite successfully, and the postgraduate students are feeling comfortable as well as happy to join these classes, which are held after their daily course are over. To Dr. Mathur, I would like to say that continue your effort as you have been doing in the past under the leadership of Dr. K.K. Parikh. The one quality of Dr. K.K. Parikh which I will like to highlight is the fact that he is a true leader. A true leader is one who has the capacity to nurture and mentor many more people for the organization, for which I compliment him. I compliment our Honorary Secretary of API, Dr. Tiwaskar, who has joined for this program. Dr. Tiwaskar not only is a secretary for API, but he's a academician and clinician par excellence. We have luminaries in Dr. Pandya, who is going to talk to us about a very common malady of hypo and hypernatremia, especially in our country, where manual laborers during the summer months suffer from hyponatremia, and today's pandemic, that is COVID, is also associated with lot of electrolyte imbalance. With these few words, I wish the program a great success and hope that all the people who are involved in this, they do their best so that we are all enriched by this knowledge to treat our patients a little more effectively. Thank you very much. Jai API and Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir, for your words of blessings and praises. We are honored by your praises. I now welcome our chairpersons, Dr. Jyotirmay Paul from Kolkata and Dr. Palaniappan from Tamil Nadu. I request my friend Dr. G.D. Ramchandani to introduce our chairperson, Dr. Jyotirmay Paul.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all of you. It's a great pleasure and great opportunity to introduce the dynamic Vice Dean of ICP, Dr. Jyotirmay Paul. And today is the historical day for RSS API Rajasthan chapter and Rajasthan Forum of ICP Fellow, because today the legends and stalwarts of the API, all the leaders and presidents and dean is there, and we are conducting under their leadership this program. Dr. Jyotirmay Paul is the, I think it does not require any introduction. He is the fellow of Indian College of Physicians. He's a fellow of Royal College of Physicians, all the three bodies, and fellow of American College of Physicians and WHO fellow. Presently, he is the Vice Dean of Indian College of Physicians, and he is the ex-Vice President of API. He is the editor of Journal of Indian Medical Association, IMA, and under his leadership, this journal is now very actively doing a lot of publications about the various topics, especially COVID. And he is a council member of West Bengal University of Health Sciences, and he has a more than 50 national and international publications in index journals. So I welcome Dr. Jyotirmay Paul for today's scientific meeting of the ICP CME under the banner of API and ICP. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, GD. I now request Dr. Pradyuman Sharma to please introduce our second chairperson, Dr. Palaniappan. Dr. Pradyuman Sharma, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, sir. With the permission of Dr. K.K. Parikh, sir, who is my mentor, elder brother, and today's the virtual electrolyte symposium, which every hour, every patient comes to a physician's era, and till now has been under-recognized, undetected. And the point is this time I'm privileged to welcome Dr. Palani Appan, MD, FICP, who is a cardiodiabetologist, who is a managing director of 50-bed hospital. He is a National API Governing Council member, organizing secretary Tamil Nadu State Chapter API, scientific committee chairman Tapi Khan, 2020, 18, and 2011, co-opted member of Joint Secretary of Hypertension Society of India, edited Tapi Khan, received prestigious 2017 Alumni Award, organizing secretary API Karu Dingul and Karu Diabetic Club, published various topics in Medicine Update, Progressive Medicine Medical Book of Epicon, Tapicon, various state API and FAQ books, and young dynamic speaker in Epicon, Tapicon, RSSDI, BBCon, HISCon, Shrek, and Dr. Mohan's International Diabetes Updates. One of the editorial board member in Tajpuri, introduced 10 new gold medals for MD PG students in Tamil Nadu, one of the most widespread and dynamic speaker we have today. You are welcome, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Pradyuman. I request the chairperson, Dr. Jyotirmay Paul, to please introduce our distinguished speaker of the evening, Dr. Sanjay Pandya.
Thank you, Chairperson, for your nice introduction. And it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Sanjay Pandey.
Hello.
Who really needs no introduction in the country. Dr. Sanjay Pandey is a nephrologist, MD DNB nephrology from Rajkot, Gujarat, and he is more popular for his book, that is the fluid and electrolyte balance. That the fluid therapy is a basic matter of all the physicians practicing not only in India, across the globe. But there is hardly any teacher who talks properly regarding how and when to give the fluid therapy and what to give with his rates, and also the electrolyte imbalance. So Dr. Pandey's book has sold more than 1 lakh copies across the India and outside India also. Again, I feel he needs no introduction. So I request Dr. Pandey, please start your deliberation.
Dr. Jyoti, little correction. You know, it's not 1 lakh copies. There are 10 lakh, 1 million copies he has already sold. More than 1 million copies, and translated over almost 32 languages all over the world.
Yes.
More
1 million
importantly, he is
copies.
most popular in South America so much that he can walk on the road as a president of South America easily. That is Sanjay Bhai.
Thank you, sir. So I request Dr. Pandey, please start your. We are eagerly waiting to listen to you.
Good evening, all senior respected teachers. API legendary leadership is under all of you. I'm so happy that, when I learned that all stars, all stalwarts, all leaders are going to be present, I thought that it's really a great fortune of mine, because I would not like to miss such opportunity to talk in presence of all leaders and stalwarts, API, as well as Rajasthan chapter. Please pardon me, because I would not like to talk and respect everyone by the name, but let me start with this, with all due respect to all leaders who are present here. Now, approach and management of hyponatremia, as described, is something which is very, very important. Now, why this subject is important? Answer is that it's common, confusing, and complex. The subject if we look at the incidence of hyponatremia, 30 to 40% of the ICU patient and almost 15% of the patient in ward are suffering from the hyponatremia. Now, why hyponatremia seems to be a confusing problem? Although it's common, everybody encounters it and treats it very regularly. But why it is confusing? See, we have clear-cut ideas that hypovolemia-like problem is a fluid deficit, needs fluid infusion. Hypokalemia is a potassium deficit, needs potassium supplementation. In hypoglycemia, we provide dextrose. And in the same way, hyponatremia is a sodium deficit and needs sodium supplementation like all other disorder. Is a wrong concept. The idea which fits in all disorders starting with preface of hypo and hyponatremia are absolutely different from each other. Hyponatremia, although we measure sodium, is a disorder of water. Hyponatremia usually means there is water retention or there is excess water rather than a problem with the sodium. So basically, when you see hyponatremia, think of water problem first and sodium problem next. So this is something which is very, very basic. Serum sodium value, which we read, is a relative proportion of the sodium and water. And therefore, when water will increase, the serum sodium will reduce. And therefore, we discuss about hyponatremia, but we need to think about water first. It's very important to remember that hyponatremia can have normal, low, or even high total body sodium. So this is something which is very, very basic. Now, when we look at the patient of hyponatremia, in our day-to-day practice, it's important that we need to take meticulous history, physical examination, especially what is the volume status and adequate, appropriate laboratory test. This meticulous history and proper examination in large number of patients will establish the underlying etiology, and that will help us to plan out the therapy. Now, when we talk about hyponatremia, the most important part of the story is that it's not a single entity. If you want to learn hyponatremia, the most important slide which I would like to discuss in my today's webinar is the one which everybody needs to remember, and that is Three Monkeys of Gandhiji. Now, why we need to remember Three Monkeys of Gandhiji and why hyponatremia is all about these Three Monkeys of Gandhiji? Because although the lab report hyponatremia is single, it reflects totally three different disorders which is based on the volume status. So hyponatremia with hypovolemia is a one entity, hyponatremia with hypervolemia is a different, and then euvolemic hyponatremia, all three different disorder, and they have different mechanism why it develops. See, hypovolemic hyponatremia is a depletion hyponatremia where salt is depleted, even water is depleted. Edematous patient with hyponatremia is altogether a different thing. There is a combined retention of water as well as salt. But as compared to retention of salt, the water is retained more, and therefore it's a dilutional hyponatremia. But in edematous patient with hyponatremia, total body sodium is more. In hypovolemic depletion hyponatremia, total body sodium is less. And the third group, which is bit different, is clinically euvolemic patient, where it's a dilutional hyponatremia with mild fluid excess. So these all three entity of hyponatremia is absolutely different in terms of its mechanism of development, in terms of underlying etiology. Diarrhea, vomiting, diuretics are common cause of the depletion hyponatremia. Congestive heart failure, cirrhosis of liver with anasarca, with increased total body sodium, but much greater total body water, is a dilutional hyponatremia with clinically anasarca. And the third group is euvolemic hyponatremia, is like SIADH and myxedema. Now, the first two, depletion hyponatremia and edematous patient with hypervolemic hyponatremia, the mechanism seems to be very clear. But this SIADH, where we say that patient is clinically euvolemic, but at the same time, we say that there is retention of water and sodium is excreted. This entity is something which is confusing, and we will try to understand it, because if we understand the disease, we can manage it very properly. See, basic physiology is that when there is fluid deficit, there will be increased ADH. ADH is a water retaining hormone. So increased ADH will retain volume. There will be correction of the hypovolemia, and ADH will suppress. But in SIADH, the basic problem is abnormal excessive secretion of antidiuretic hormone. Now, this ADH is a water retaining hormone. So what happens in SIADH? When there is increased ADH, it will lead to water retention. Now, because of the water retention, there will be expansion of the ECF, and ECF expansion will suppress renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, and aldosterone is responsible for the sodium retention. When there is decreased aldosterone, the sodium excretion in urine increases. So on one side, there is retention of water. On another side, there is excretion of the sodium, that is natriuresis. And as a common combined effect, end result will be hyponatremia, because water is retained and salt is excreted. Now the question arises that if water is retained, then why we say that SIADH is euvolemic? Why there is no edema? Answer is that with ECF volume expansion, why there is no euvolemia, why there is euvolemia and why there is no edema? Because of two things. Number one, ECF volume expansion will lead to increased renal perfusion, which lead to diuresis, and that will prevent edema formation. And second thing, that this volume expansion in left atrium will lead to increased excretion of ANP. And ANP has two characteristics. Number one, diuresis, which will prevent hyponatremia, and second is natriuresis, which will aggravate hyponatremia. So in SIADH, what we can summarize that what exactly happens, that water is retained because of the excessive ADH activity, sodium is excreted because of the aldosterone suppression, and patient will have euvolemia because of diuresis, which prevents edema formation, although there is mild excess volume of fluid in the body, and that is because of increased renal perfusion and because of increased ANP. So in clinical practice, the simple, very important guideline is what? Think of SIADH when patient has euvolemic hyponatremia. And very simple, very, very important investigation, which will clinch the diagnosis, is low uric acid and low blood urea nitrogen. See, there is volume expansion, and volume expansion will lead to increased renal perfusion and increased excretion of uric acid, increased excretion of blood urea, and therefore there will be low uric acid and blood urea. So this is something which is very, very simple and very, very important. So in patient of SIADH, when you think that, oh, we are unable to know what exactly is going on, whether it is SIADH or what is the etiology, not very clear, go for uric acid. And low uric acid will try to clinch the diagnosis of SIADH. So this is something which is very, very important. An important factor, important part of the story is that before diagnosing SIADH, the euvolemic with hyponatremia, other causes like hypothyroidism, adrenal insufficiency, renal insufficiency, and cerebral salt wasting syndrome, we need to exclude. So to summarize, the diagnostic criteria of SIADH is that there will be hypotonic hyponatremia, patient is clinically euvolemic, and there is a paradoxical finding. See, if there is hyponatremia, what we expect in urine, that if there is hyponatremia, the plasma sodium is low, even urinary sodium in routine circumstances is expected to be low. But here it's a paradoxical finding. With low plasma sodium, there is high urinary sodium because of the natriuresis. Plasma osmolality is low, but urinary osmolality is high, and that is going to clinch the diagnosis. So exclude hypothyroidism, renal failure, diuretic therapy, and very, very important, low serum uric acid clinches the diagnosis. So with this whole part, basic understanding, now the therapeutic part will become very, very simple for all of us to plan. Now, when we think of the therapy of the hyponatremia, consider all aspects. Treat patient, don't treat lab report. If I have a serum sodium of 115 in one patient who has just transferred from surgical unit with the convulsion, then my plan will be different. And there is a second elderly gentleman of 70 years who is receiving thiazide diuretics from last 1 month and complains that, sir, after starting this new antihypertensive therapy, I am feeling very weak. So serum sodium is 115 in both, but there is no fixed treatment protocol. We need to individualize therapy, and this therapy is based on 3 major parameters. Number 1, underlying etiology. Number 2, what is the volume status? And very, very important, that how bad is the patient clinically? What is the severity of the symptoms? So on basis of this, we plan out the therapy. The first and foremost, with the history examination, try to find out that why patient has hyponatremia and try to address the problem, because that is something which is very, very important. And most important part of story is that provide specific treatment. Hyponatremia is not a disease, but it is the end result of multiple problems which is underlying. So try to address it. Look for its cause, look for the underlying disease, and try to treat it. So there are 2 aspects. One, etiological management, and second is the management of the hyponatremia per se. Drug causing hyponatremia is important, and most important out of all is the thiazide diuretics. Assess the volume. This is most important. Volume assessment is most important. Why it is most important? Because there are 3 different kind of volume, and all together, all 3 different type of the therapy. So if you don't diagnose the volume status, then your therapy is not going to be right, because there are 3 different ways. Where are you going? So you need to plan out that what is the underlying problem and go ahead accordingly. So always remember 3 monkeys of Gandhiji. Plan volume assessment first and then go ahead. If the underlying problem is hypovolemic hyponatremia. It's a depletion hyponatremia. Salt is lost, water is lost. Then simple, supplement salt, supplement water. How do we do it? Either with Ringer's lactate, either with isotonic saline, and at the same time avoiding hypotonic IV fluids as well as oral plenty of fluids. This is something which is very, very simple. Take care of the potassium when you are dealing with hypovolemic hyponatremia, because with thiazides, with diarrhea, vomiting, hypokalemia is common. Now, the second part of the story, second monkey of Gandhiji, is edematous patient, hypervolemic hyponatremia, where total body sodium is more, but total body water is even greater than that. Now, here the problem is what? Water is retained, so restrict fluid. Sodium is retained, so restrict salt. And that's how we go ahead. And there is an extra water. So what to do? Excrete extra water. And for that, we use furosemide, that is loop diuretics. Very, very important that sodium is low. Sodium is 120. So let us give IV fluid. That is something which we should always use, always avoid in any of the edematous patient with hyponatremia, because it's not sodium depletion, it is sodium dilution, extra water. Even the sodium is more, but even water is much more, and therefore avoid IV fluid. This is something which is very important. And now coming to the last part, euvolemic hyponatremia. We have discussed two basic problems. One, there is retention of water. Second is there is salt loss. But retention of the water is the first step where pathogenesis starts. So the therapy starts with restriction of the fluid. That is something which is very, very important. Second thing, excrete the fluid. And the third thing, provide salt. So this is something which is very, very important. But out of all, the most important is what? Restriction of the fluid. This is something which is very, very important. Now, when we want to give the salt, how we will do it? Selection of the fluid in SIADH is important. Now, we know that in given patient, sodium is low, less than 135, maybe 125, maybe even 150. So we feel that, oh, saline, fine. How much is the sodium in saline? The saline contains 154 milliequivalent of sodium. So we feel like giving the sodium containing saline because it has a 154 milliequivalent of sodium, which is much higher, and patient sodium is just 120, 115. But very, very important, avoid temptation of using isotonic saline in patient with SIADH. In SIADH, isotonic saline is going to worsen the hyponatremia. The sodium was 120. We have given 1 liter of normal saline. After, say, 12 hours, we have measured the serum sodium. Instead of 120, it has become 118. So, very, very important part of the story is that in SIADH, don't give isotonic saline. Then what should we give? We should give hypertonic saline, and that is the 3% NaCl. So when patient is clinically sick, symptomatic, euvolemic, diagnosis is SIADH, and we want to treat it, the only fluid which is effective is 3% NaCl, and that is hypertonic saline. Now, 100 ml fluid is available, but how much salt does it provide? Answer is that in 100 ml 3% saline, it is 51 milliequivalent of sodium. 2 ml provides, every 2 ml provides 1 milliequivalent of sodium, and this is hyperosmolar solution. Now, urinary osmolality is high, but the osmolality of 3% is even much higher, and that's the reason it can treat hyponatremia due to SIADH. So, when we think of giving 3% NaCl in SIADH, remember the purpose of infusion of hypertonic saline is to reduce cerebral edema. See, cerebral edema is the cause of the symptoms of the hyponatremia. And therefore, we want to decrease cerebral edema, and that is the purpose of giving 3% NaCl. And that is going to correct or prevent neurological complication. When there is increased cerebral edema, there will be increased intracranial tension. Because of that, there will be neurological sign symptoms. If not corrected, even there will be herniation. And with that, patient will have convulsion, respiratory failure, and death. And to prevent such catastrophic, use 3% NaCl. The rule of thumb is what? How much 3% NaCl should be given? We may not have time to calculate much. The new team of our resident may not understand much thing, but very, very important is the simple fact is that 1 ml per kg per hour of 3% NaCl will increase serum sodium by 1 milliequivalent per liter. So if you want to increase, say, 3 milliequivalent, then you need to give 3 ml per kg per hour. So if patient is weighing, say, 70 kg, and you want to increase just by 3 milliequivalent, then how much will you give? It will be 210 ml, and therefore at least 100 ml 2 pints should be given, so that 3 milliequivalent per 3 milliequivalent sodium rise is expected with the management. Very important to remember while giving 3% NaCl that mild to moderate hyponatremia without marked symptoms, don't give 3% NaCl. Avoid 3% NaCl in mild to moderate hyponatremia, in hypovolemic hyponatremia, even in hypervolemic hyponatremia. If required, 3% should be given, but it may aggravate the volume overload, will provide the large amount of sodium, and therefore, if not required, or only judiciously in selected patient of edematous patient with hyponatremia, 3% NaCl should be given, and never give in chronic hyponatremia. So, most important part of the story in SIADH is restriction of the fluid, infuse 3% NaCl, avoid saline, and go ahead accordingly. So, volume status assessment is very, very important. But what to give, in which patient, how fast to correct hyponatremia, that all depends upon the severity of the hyponatremia. So symptoms of hyponatremia dictates the urgency of treatment, because symptoms of hyponatremia determines the severity of brain edema, and therefore symptoms depends on duration as well as sodium concentration of the patient. So history evaluation is something which is very, very important. Acute hyponatremia are more symptomatic, where the development occurs in less than 48 hours. Chronic hyponatremia is a long-standing, more than 48 hours, and depending on onset, the speed of correction is determined, and that is something which is very, very critical. Correction of the hyponatremia needs meticulous planning, because there was a very excellent article in Kidney International Nephrology Forum in 1990, treating hyponatremia. Damn if we do, damn if we don't. Why? Because if you rapidly correct hyponatremia, then patient will have osmotic demyelination syndrome, central pontine demyelinosis, which is going to be harmful, can kill the patient, but after a couple of days. And if you don't treat it, then there will be complication of the swelling of the brain. And therefore, it's very, very important that we properly take care of the underlying problem. And if we have acute hyponatremia, we need rapid correction. If we have a chronic hyponatremia, we need slow correction. Remember, what are the risks? The risk of overcorrection is osmotic demyelination syndrome. Risk of undercorrection is cerebral herniation. And therefore, rate of correction is something which is very, very important. What should be the expected rate of correction? How fast should we treat hyponatremia? Answer is that in acute hyponatremia, rapid correction means in first 24 hours, it should be 10 to 12 milliequivalent per liter. In first 48 hours, it should be less than 18 milliequivalent per liter. And that is considered to be the rapid correction in acute hyponatremia. While in chronic hyponatremia, aggressive therapy will be harmful, will lead to osmotic demyelination syndrome. Gentle correction of required 4 to 6 milliequivalent is fine, but always less than 8 milliequivalent per liter is the standard recommendation. And therefore, this is something which always should be kept in mind while treating the hyponatremia. So differentiate whether it is acute or chronic, differentiate and then go ahead. Initial rate of correction is critical because depending on that, we get the reduction of the cerebral edema. So what is the underlying problem? Plan accordingly. Okay. If we have problem like patient is drowsy, patient is likely to have respiratory abnormality, that means cerebral edema is very, very high. And in such life-threatening symptoms, we need to act fast. So depending upon the severity of the disease, we need to plan out how fast are we going to give 3% NaCl. Active seizures, signs of brain herniation, asymmetrical pupil, respiratory abnormality needs very aggressive therapy. So what is a very aggressive therapy? Answer is that use 3% NaCl. Give 100 ml bolus in first 10 minutes. Wait. If no improvement, repeat it. American guidelines of management of the hyponatremia says that similar 3 bolus you can provide and monitor patient and then subsequently place slow. European guidelines says that give 150 ml bolus, but only 2 bolus. So common to both are that maximum bolus which you can give in first hour is some 300 ml that is going to reduce cerebral edema and subsequently monitor serum sodium and go slow. And as we discussed, the goal in first 24 hours in acute hyponatremia is not more than 10 to 12 milliequivalent. If the symptoms are moderate, we will place slow. And if, see, very, very important is that it's not only treatment with 3% NaCl, but there is a danger of giving water. So it's very, very important that while giving management with 3% NaCl, try to see that patient is not given unnecessary water. So in such sick patient, water can literally kill your patient. So on one side, give 3% NaCl. Second thing, along with that, strict restriction of the fluid, if required, diuretics, and avoid isotonic saline. So this is something which is very, very important. And now all of us feel that we have an excellent molecule, and that is tolvaptan. So should we use tolvaptan because patient is very sick? Answer is that in immediate treatment of acute severe hyponatremia, there is no role of vaptans. Don't give it. It's contraindicated. Do not rely on fluid restriction alone. Don't give isotonic fluids. Don't give vaptans. In urgent treatment of acute symptomatic hyponatremia, use 3% NaCl, which is something which is very, very important. Moderate symptoms, moderately slow therapy is important. In chronic management, 4 to 6 milliequivalent, maximum 8 milliequivalent. Try to treat underlying problem, try to provide more salt. What is the underlying problem? If it is SIADH, restrict the fluid. If required, give diuretics, but play slow. In chronic hyponatremia, don't try to treat it fast because it may give rise to osmotic demyelination syndrome. So rate of correction of the hyponatremia is something which is very, very important. In first 24 hours, in acute 10 to 12 milliequivalent, in chronic 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 milliequivalent. How fast, that we have already discussed. 3% is required in acute symptoms, while in chronic symptoms, it's not at all required. Monitor it properly. Vital signs, neurological signs, fluid balance, daily weight, daily urine output, and daily serum electrolytes. See, when patient is sick and acute, it's not daily serum electrolytes. It may be every 4 hourly, even 2 hourly, depending on the clinical status. You have to decide and maintain strict weight chart if possible. Because if weight is reducing, that means you are removing extra fluid and your treatment is improving. Weight gain, or if you say that urine total intake is more than output, that means there is a worsening of hyponatremia, fluid is increasing. But effective treatment means weight loss. Effective treatment means intake lesser than urine output, and that is going to correct the hyponatremia. So some of the common errors is inadequate investigation, fluid restriction, even in diuretic-induced hypovolemic hyponatremia. Some of the patients are receiving fluid restriction and IV saline, that may be harmful. And some of the patient is continuing with antihypertensive thiazide, and this should be avoided. Now, last part amongst the hyponatremia is tolvaptan, which we are using in day-to-day practice. The basic fact is that how tolvaptan and Lasix, which we are using, are differing. The common to both are what? Both leads to water loss. This is common to both Lasix as well as tolvaptan. But with standard diuretics, there will be loss of sodium and potassium. With tolvaptan, there is no loss of sodium and potassium. And because of that, the water will be lost, but sodium will not be lost. And therefore, it will raise the serum sodium concentration. And that's how it corrects hyponatremia. So very, very important is that because both leads to loss of water, if patient is having hypovolemia, hypovolemic hyponatremia, don't use tolvaptan. Because tolvaptan is so much popular that people feel like using in hyponatremia. But it should be used judiciously. What are the indications? See, the marketing of company is that hyponatremia is equal to tolvaptan. And that's how they project it as a very large and very, very potent molecule. And everybody feel like prescribing in every patient of hyponatremia. But that's not the case. Majority of the patient don't need hyponatremia, don't need tolvaptan for their hyponatremia. It's a second line of therapy. It's a temporary therapy, and use it selectively. When should we use? We should use in SIADH and congestive heart failure patient, selected patient, not all, selected patient, and for short duration. Tolvaptan is the most appropriate if there is significant and persistent SIADH not responding to water restriction, furosemide, salt supplementation, and you need to do some procedure or something where bringing sodium higher is important. So all patient is symptomatic. In such small group of patient, use tolvaptan. The contraindication you need to know, the first and foremost is hypovolemic hyponatremia. With liver disease, all guidelines says that don't use it. Acute symptomatic hyponatremia, there is no role. 3% is going on, don't give Vaptans. Both cannot be given together. If there is renal failure creatinine more than 3.5, effect will be very mild. Can be given, not contraindicated, but won't be that effective. And if patient is unable to sense the thirst, then don't give it, because some of the patient will have a sizable diuresis, they may be dehydrated. Tolvaptan should not be used for more than 30 days because of its hepatotoxicity, is what is current guideline tells us. So take home message with hyponatremia is that hyponatremia which develops quickly should be treated fast. The one which develops slowly should be corrected slowly. Hyponatremia is not equal to saline infusion. Avoid it. And always, always, and always remember 3 monkeys of Gandhiji while planning the treatment of hyponatremia. Hypovolemic hyponatremia, provide salt and water. In edematous patient with hyponatremia, restrict fluid, restrict salt, excrete water by diuretics. And in euvolemic, most important, restrict water, restrict water, restrict water. Provide salt, and furosemide is important. Treat underlying etiology. Plan based on volume status, step down, monitor. This is, and now hyponatremia is uncommon problem, so I will rapidly go over it. It's a less frequent but needs care because leads to high mortality. The way in which hyponatremia is water excess. Hypernatremia is usually means water deficit. See, if patient is fully conscious and alert, the normal thirst will prevent hypernatremia. And in such fit patient who is alert, there is no risk of development of the hypernatremia because patient will have thirst, will drink water, and will get corrected. It rarely occurs in healthy adult because of they can respond well to the thirst. But the patient, like infant, who cannot say that, oh, I am thirsty, mujhe pani pina hai. Elderly patient who is drowsy, where thirst modality is impaired, or they don't have access to water. They don't recognize that there is thirst because of the altered sensorium or dementia. These are the group of patients who will develop hypernatremia. And second group is iatrogenic, where large amount of 3% NaCl, normal saline, bicarb is given, and they are unable to excrete because large volume in a short span given cannot be accommodated. And these are the patients, small number of patients who are likely to have hypernatremia but will be edematous. So common conditions are altered mental status, burns, head injury, renal insufficiency, bicarb and 3% infusion. These are the cases where you will get hypernatremia. Now, management is most of the time simple. Administration of water by mouth, if altered sensorium, by nasogastric tube. And giving hypotonic fluid, like 5% dextrose, is most important part of the story. But very, very important take-home message is that if your hypernatremic patient is hypotensive, if patient is in shock, then don't give this hypotonic fluid. Start with either isotonic saline, Ringer's lactate, or plasma light. First, let blood pressure be stabilized, and then step down to 0.45% saline, and then step down further and give hypotonic fluid. So this is something which is very, very basic. If you are looking for more information, then this fluid therapy book, more than 1 lakh copies are sold. But I have 2 different areas. The second area where all of you are helping me is the kidneyeducation.com website. The website in 37 languages, proud of India, received World Record Award for ebook in highest number of languages. It's in 25 international languages and 12 Indian languages, received 9 crore hits. So lot many people across the world are using it. It's totally free, free to read, free to download, free to get even on WhatsApp. This is not Sanjay Pandya. This is the result of global team of more than 100 nephrologists who has translated 200-page kidney book in their native language, and without expectation of anything, they have put their book on web for free use. So Heads off to all these nephrologists who has really helped, and even global nephrology giants like Dr. Rumuzi, who was a president of International Society of Nephrology, and Dr. Garcia, who was a president of International Federation of Kidney Foundation. They prepared Italian version and Spanish version. So this is a God-created project, because such a giant, 100 nephrologists across the world cannot help in this matter. We are blessed. And second thing, that in this whole activity, which took more than 15 years, there is no pharmaceutical, there is no advertisement, and we take help of everyone. But we request all of them to help in all possible way, so that this message of free educational website can reach to everyone. So in the last, I would like to request all of you to support Kidney Education website. I would like to say thanks, million thanks to all, Parikh Sahib, Mathur sir, all API office bearers who has given me opportunity to talk in this important subject of hyponatremia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay Pandya. You are simply mesmerizing. It was a wonderful talk. It was an experience to hear you. Hats off to you, sir.
Really wonderful session, sir. Pandya, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
And may I ask some questions, sir?
Please, sir.
Dr. Palniappan, questions we'll take in the last. We'll have panel discussion and we'll take the questions.
Okay, Grace, no problem.
Now we move on to the next part of the program, panel discussion. I request my friend Dr. Jyotirmoy Paul to introduce our panelist, Dr. N.P. Singh. Is Dr. Jyotirmoy Paul around? Jyoti, please unmute yourself. I think Dr. Jyotirmoy Paul is not there. So, Dr. N.P. Singh is a renowned nephrologist from Delhi. He is a member faculty council. And next panelist is Dr. Mangesh Tivaskar and Dr. Anupam Prakash. I request Dr. Palniappan to introduce Dr. Mangesh Tivaskar and Dr. Anupam Prakash.
Yeah, thank you so much, my dear friend, Dr. Grace Mathur, sir, Grace Mathur, and Dr. K.K. Parikh, sir, and all API faculties in Rajasthan for giving me this opportunity. May I introduce Dr. Mangesh Tivaskar. He's one of my close friends. He's the consultant physician and diabetologist working in Silpha Medical Research Center, Mumbai. He's a gold medalist, both UG and PG, and honorary general secretary, National API, ICP, and PRF, on editor board JP, Medicine Update, IJD, and governing body West Zone representative of ACP India chapter, and guest lecture. He gave guest editor, Insulite Journal, World Journal of Anemia, and delivered more than 1,000 lectures and national and international conferences, and has multiple chapters, publication, and posters, and published in peer-reviewed journal. And next, my introduction to my dear friend, Dr. Anupam Prakash. He is the professor of medicine, Lady Hardinge Medical College, Delhi. He is editor-in-chief, Indian Journal of Medical Specialists, indexed in Web of Science, and on scientific paper writing, management of diabetes, and co-editor of books in management of diabetes in pregnancy, and handbook of research methodology, associate editor, API Medicine, and 9th edition, and 215 publication in journals and books, delivered 110 lectures and 22 paper presentation, principal investigator of 12 phase international trials, and guided 8 STS and 12 PG thesis, and DST award as young researcher to meet Nobel Lawrence in Germany. Over to the panelists.
Now over to our moderators, Dr. G.D. Ramchandani, Dr. Pradyumna Sharma. Dr. Ramchandani is very energetic physician. He is a journal member API, Secretary of Rajasthan Forum ICP Fellows. Dr. Pradyumna Sharma is very senior physician from Jaipur. He is an integral part of all the academic activities we are doing in Rajasthan. So over to our moderators, Dr. Ramchandani, Dr. Pradyumna Sharma.
So my sincere thanks to Dr. Girishi Mathur, and let me congratulate the main speaker for a beautiful deliberation and with the dynamic slides. I am really mesmerized, amazed, and shocked. I do not have the words to express the beautifulity and the way the things were animated and presented in a very, very simplified way. So let me to address the first query of this evening, and my question will be addressed to Dr. N.P. Singh sir, and that's in relation. What do we understand by pseudo hyponatremia? Because we have learned hyponatremia and hypernatremia, but there's another term that what pseudo does it. What is the existence of it? So, Dr. N.P. Singh sir.
Thank you, Pradyum, and let me at the outset thank Dr. Mathur, Dr. Parikh, and also my mentor, Dr. Munjal. I'm so privileged to be among the top stalwarts of API, which includes not only my teachers, but also students like Anupam, who has exceeded all my expectations, doing wonderfully well. Also, I'm very happy to be with my colleague, Dr. Sanjay Pandya. I think we've been interacting with each other for a long time, and I've been very lucky to be a part of his book. I was given the task of translating Punjabi book, and thank you, Dr. Pandya, for a lovely talk. Now, actually, probably Dr. Sanjay deliberately chose not to talk about pseudohyponatremia. I think it's very essential for us to understand, as very clearly made out, that when we talk about hyponatremia, it is hypotonic fluid which is more important, and hypoosmolar. Now, hypoosmolar can be all of three types, whether it is the volume is more in cirrhosis, volume is euvolumic in SIDH, and volume is low can be in dehydrated state. But more important is to talk about is osmolality of the fluid or the plasma. So there are conditions in which you can have low sodium levels, but with either a normal osmolar or higher osmolarity in the blood. Now, please understand that most of the cause of hyponatremia are because of the hypoosmolarity. But sometimes because of a lab error. Now, we know that there are three important methods of actually measuring serum sodium. Earlier on, we used to flame photometry, which used to do an indirect method and had a dilutional. We had to rely on a dilutional effect because of the fact that out of 100% of plasmas, 93% is water and 7% is a solute present in that. Then we started the indirect ion electrophore method, and then nowadays some of the labs are doing the direct ion electrophore. So with direct ion electrophore method, we can remove this so-called pseudohyponatremia. But in indirect method or in flame photometry method, if the solute content of the plasma is increased, let's say in multiple myeloma or in dyslipidemia, hypercholesteremias, or hypertriglyceridemias, or a very high protein content, whether in multiple myeloma or in other hypergamma-globulinic states, then the total content of the water will be reduced, and so the actual sodium level which will be detected by these methods will be much lower than the actual sodium. So this is just an aberration of the lab, and we do not need to worry about it. So whenever you see a patient who has a low sodium than 135 mg, patient is asymptomatic, then we kindly check with the lab as to what method they have used. Second is the impact of glucose or mannitols on the serum plasma values. We know that in patients with severe hyperglycemia, with every increase in 100 milligram of glucose, there is a decrease in sodium by 2.4 microgram because of the fact that water will come from the cells into the plasma. So it is again a dilutional hyponatremia. Normally the patients are asymptomatic. But we need to understand that patients with hyperglycemia can also, because of the osmotic diuresis, can have severe dehydrated state as well in severe hyperglycemia. But By and large, an increase of 100 milligram of glucose will result in a decrease of sodium by 2.4 milligram. Similarly, in certain post-operative states, especially when you are doing a prostate surgery, there can be mannitol infusions, there can be certain high osmolar infusion, which can also pull the fluid from the cells. So these are, again, an aberrations which we need to look into. So what is most important is look at the clinical status, as has been very clearly pointed out by Dr. Sanjay. We look at the symptoms of the patients and also look at how we have measured the sodium. And if it is a lab error, then we need to correct it. But by and large, as I said, in the recent new labs, we are doing it by the direct ion electrophoretic method, which will rule out this dilutional factor. It does not use dilution. So we will have a true sodium levels in the blood. And similarly, very high rare situation when you have leukemias, when you have a very high plasma content of the solute, patients can have mild pseudo-hyponatremia. I hope it answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. N.P. Singh, sir, for clarifying the pseudo and true hyponatremia. So my first question is from Dr. Sanjay Pandya, sir, that in day-to-day practice, whenever we get any call from the ICU or in the hospital that such patient is suffering from hyponatremia, we straightforward to start oral medication, that is tolvaptan. So what are, when do you use tolvaptan in hyponatremia? At what time and what are the duration of that tolvaptan, sir?
Thank you very much, sir. Basically, tolvaptan, rather than starting, I have greater experience of discontinuing tolvaptan, because tolvaptan is so widely used that most of the time patient comes with tolvaptan and I have a responsibility to discontinue it. So when do we start? To start tolvaptan is only because overall for 30 days you can give. So if underlying problem is not treatable, then 30 days is not going to make the difference. But if besides all treatment, fluid restriction, salt supplementation, giving diuretics, if the symptoms are not improving and for temporary time, because by the time you treat etiology, it may take some time. So at that time, you can use tolvaptan. Suppose patient needs some surgery, and for increasing, if the sodium is low, then surgery may not be feasible. So in that case, we need to increase the sodium fast and maintain it for some time. So in such case, there are few such cases where we use tolvaptan in hyponatremia. Otherwise, it should not be given. The sad part of the story is that many of the patients who comes to us, to our nephrologist team, with hyponatremia, they are hypovolemic, but still they are receiving tolvaptan. So that is something. So I will say that use it very judiciously. Good drug, but should be used selectively.
So just to reiterate, in one sentence, I think it has no role in acute symptomatic hyponatremia. Only in very selective cases of FIDH who are not responding to fluid restriction, we may resort to giving this drug. Though this drug has excellent use in other causes of renal disorders, but tolvaptan for this.
And especially chronic hyponatremia, SIDH, under correction, maybe patient has a chronic hyponatremia where you can probably try and use this for a smaller duration of time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. In the continuation of this tolvaptan, there is one more question that which is the commonest mistake few clinicians make while using tolvaptan in hyponatremia?
Yeah, basically, see, before starting tolvaptan, what we need to keep in mind is that we should exclude hypovolemia. That is the most important. And second thing, that if, as Dr. N.P. Singh sir said, that if patient is symptomatic and altered sensorium is there, in such cases, for immediate improvement in hyponatremia, we shouldn't use it. So two major mismatch are in hypovolemic patient, and second is in more symptomatic patient. These are the two places where it is most commonly misused. So this is something which we should keep in mind. And moreover, access to water should be available, because if they have a lot of diuresis, if they don't have water, then they will end up in trouble. overcorrection, osmotic demyelination syndrome, because it's used in chronic hyponatremia.
And mostly sometimes, if they are combined with diuretics, then
And it is
probably,
EPS
multiply problems further
Yes.
significantly. And the possibility of, central pontine myelinolysis go very, very high, especially in this context.
Dr. Pradyuman, please.
Yes, sir. So, beautiful presentation by Dr. Sanjay Pandya. Now, my question is addressed to Dr. Anupam Prakash. What symptoms should prompt us to suspect hyponatremia?
Thank you, Dr. Pradyuman. At the outset, I thank Dr. Parikh and Dr. Mathur for inviting me here, and my regards to all the senior persons, including Dr. N.P. Singh, who has been my teacher. And I remember about a quarter of a century back, I had the privilege of writing something on hyponatremia and hypernatremia under the guidance of Dr. N.P. Singh only. So thanks, sir, and thanks to Dr. President, sir, Dean, sir, Dr. Munjal, sir also. So the question is about hyponatremia, and it is a very difficult thing to suspect hyponatremia. Dr. Pandya said very clearly that number one, hyponatremia is not always because of a itself primary disorder. It is primarily a manifestation of another disease. So it is important to see that yes, there may be another disease which can contribute to hyponatremia, but yes, at times in elderly, as age advances, hyponatremia can be an occult presentation, and it may be very difficult to diagnose at times. So unless until we have a very high index of suspicion, we at times do not realize that the patient may be having hyponatremia, because these initial signs, especially if the hyponatremia is chronic or insidious onset, the initial signs could be very subtle, or the symptoms could be very subtle. It could be just mild nausea, lethargy, slight inability to concentrate. All these things could be there in the early stage, and they could be easily missed. But yes, as it progresses, because it is the manifestation of another disease, if the disease is progressing, sooner or later, maybe in a matter of few days, or if it is an acute state, obviously it would be symptomatic, but in a matter of few days, it obviously worsens, where it can lead to confusion, drowsiness, high degree of irritability. The patient may even become comatose and throw seizures, in fact, which is one of the presentations in the emergency setup that we actually have. So it is very important to understand, even in hospitalized patients, unless and until we are specifically looking for it, we can easily miss hyponatremia, because the patient as well as the doctor is troubled with a number of other symptoms which actually are more troublesome, but hyponatremia may be just insidious or a bystander, and we are often going to miss it unless until we suspect, and we are agile to treat it also. I think that suffices the answer to the question.
Just to add one more thing is that one of the major risk factors for falls is hyponatremia. So many of these patients may in fact present to the ER with a history of fall, and when you do their sodium, you might find that their sodium are low. So one has to be extremely careful in such situation that chronic hyponatremia can be one of the major risk factor for falls, especially in the elderly. And rest, of course, everything is being covered.
Yes, I totally agree. It is very important. We may suspect TIAs as cause of falls or locomotor instability in elderly, but in the elderly, it is very important. Dr. N.P. Singh is perfectly right that yes, falls could be the first manifestation of hyponatremia in many patients.
One aspect regarding chronic hyponatremia, because chronic hyponatremia present with unsteady gait and osteoporosis. So very, very important is that you need to provide sodium, but at the same time, there is leaching of the calcium. So providing adequate calcium and adequate vitamin D is something which is very, very important in chronic hyponatremia, but is not really very much emphasized in most of the literature.
One important point I want to add to Anupam Prakash, you are absolutely right. I have managed more than 500 cases of tuberculous meningitis presenting as SIADH, hyponatremia and hypocalcemia. It is one of the important finding in tuberculous meningitis. Recently, they have included that as a criteria. That is hyponatremia and hypocalcemia is very, very common. When the patient is coming with altered sensorium, neck stiffness, head neck sign positive, please rule out TBM. And brain.
So,
Thank
sir,
One of the
can also
important-
emphasize that hypocalcemia is a part of the chronic hyponatremia in sir's observation. So, always think of providing calcium and vitamin D adequately while treating chronic hyponatremia.
Thank you, Dr. Anup Prakash. Beautifully, we should always have in the back of the mind, any of the patient landing in ER, we should always why. We should have 3 times why. We should not depend only on the one diagnosis. We should try to always correlate with the secondary. Could it not be because of this? Could it not be because of this? The reasoning for the 3 times will make the lesser the mistakes. And the message to the physician, always look for serum electrolytes urgently. That's very important. Do not take DIH only on a one phenomena. Would be an what has resulted in such a disease. So the sodium has a very big importance in acute as well as in chronic management. So now we will be addressing to Dr. Mangesh Srivastava, sir, why and how to treat chronic hyponatremia, because till now we have been looking for the acute and the chronic. Now this time we will focusing more on chronic hyponatremia. So Dr. Mangesh Srivastava, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, sir, for this question. And good evening, everybody. Thank you, Girish and entire team. And of course, my regards to all stalwarts of APL. And Sanjay Bhai, as you are a rock star, honestly speaking, I don't know how many times I listen to you. I keep on getting mesmerized and more jealous about you. Because, probably half an hour down the line, I must have forgotten, as Dr. Kamlesh Tiwari rightly pointed out, that, half an hour down the line, you would have lost 50% of probably what you have read. Imagine this, such a volatile subject, such a difficult subject to remember. You feel that you are understanding it, but the moment you are away from it, within 1 hour's time, you have lost 50% or more of that. And again, you would like to listen to Dr. Sanjay Pandey again the same thing. And as Dr. Sharma has beautifully asked, chronic hyponatremia, you have treated very well. My only point is this, that, try and rule out the other causes which can lead to hyponatremia, especially in the chronic situations. Like check out whether there is a possibility of an Addison's. Check out whether there is any possibility of other endocrinopathies like hypothyroidism. Check out any other reasons why a patient has, and address the cause more prominently rather than focusing just on managing the hyponatremia. Of course, chronic hyponatremia, as very well said by Sanjay sir, it requires a very slow correction. You should not be over enthusiastic. Maybe that is one area where additionally, if you have not developed a habit of measuring the serum osmolarity, please measure the serum osmolarity. And also, whenever you are evaluating the patient of chronic hyponatremia, always have a habit of measuring urinary osmolarity also, because that will technically clinch the diagnosis, as Sanjay Bhai has rightly pointed out, that along with uric acid, probably if you focus on this will definitely help you to choose your therapies wisely. And especially when it comes to Vaptan, and especially tall Vaptan, maybe that looking at osmolarity, both urinary as well as the total serum osmolarity, will surely change the management. Of course, there are few areas where you need to correct endocrine abnormalities. You treat them and probably you correct hyponatremia automatically. There are situations where you may need to use Vaptans for a smaller period of time. Probably chronic hyponatremia is one such area where you can be justified in using Vaptans with an absolute medical, I would say, vigilance, and of course, with a good education and awareness to the patient also. So I believe that suffices your answer, Dr. Sharma sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mangesh. Once again, you are a great orator, and nice to hear about this question. So now we are moving to our senior nephrologist and faculty member of ICP, Dr. N.P. Singh sir. That every time, whenever there is hyponatremia, we used to think only tolvaptan. So is there any other drugs? What are the common drugs implicated for the hyponatremia?
I think you have hit the nail on the head. See, whenever a patient comes to you with symptomatic or asymptomatic hyponatremia, and as alluded by Dr. Sanjay, we must look at the list of drugs which the patient is taking. Whether it is NSAIDs, whether these are diuretics, whether they are antihypertensive, and you'll be surprised to know that ACE inhibitors, ARBs, cancer channel blockers, all have been implicated in not only causing natriuresis, but also they can be one of the factors for syndrome of inappropriate ADH. Very well alluded to by Dr. Sanjay that ADH may be inappropriately stimulated in patients who are on NSAIDs, who are on antipsychotic drugs, who are on psychoactive drugs, who are on anti-cancer drugs. If I look at the list given by one of the things, it has contains probably more than 100. But in common clinical practice, I think diuretics are the main, and especially thiazide. When you have a combination of hyponatremia, hypokalemia, and maybe a normal or a slightly higher serum calcium levels, always suspect thiazide, especially in elderly. Now we start thiazides as in fact in the place where I am in USA, thiazides are the treatment of first choice for antihypertensive. But we need to understand that here I don't sweat. I use this shirt 4 times, 5 times. But in India, we sweat so much, especially in these months, that we lose a significant amount of sodium as well as the water. So thiazides are the culprits. In fact, we did a study on trying to look at the serum sodium level in 4 seasons, and we found out that there are 2-3 millicrons of difference between summers and winter ones. So thiazides are the most important drugs. NSAIDs, very commonly used, antipsychotic drugs, antidepressant drugs, anti-cancer drugs, and all of them have been implicated. Indomethacin, amiodarone, recently calcium channel blockers, when they are initiated, they can also be natriuretic. So due to the mechanism of natriuresis or due to SIDH, we can have a huge list of drugs which can be implicated in SIDH. So that is why whenever a patient comes to you, either in the OPD with a serum sodium level which is less than 135 milligrams, or in the ER, always look at the drugs which are the culprits. In fact, all these conditions which Dr. Sanjay alluded to, normal saline should not be given, except probably when the patient is in a severe dehydrated state, and one such condition is cerebral salt wasting. In this situation, instead of giving 3%, I think the ideal treatment would be giving a normal saline. So drugs are very, very important cause. In fact, they are the major causes which can contribute or be the main cause for hyponatremia. Thank you.
And in fact, as you have rightly pointed out, sir, NP sir, I completely agree to the fact that loop diuretics will not cause, or very rarely cause, sodium depletion or the electrolyte depletions. But thiazide diuretics are the most, I would say, they are the biggest culprits to cause huge electrolyte disturbances, especially in elderly. So I still bet whenever we discuss, management of hypertension, especially in the Indian subcontinent, the first choice of drug for managing elderly hypertension, especially managing systolic, isolated systolic hypertension, thiazides or thiazide-like diuretics are quoted there. But believe me, these are real problematic drugs, and patients can genuinely develop problems. In fact, I would bet there that probably loop diuretics like furosemide or probably torsemide would be a better choice, especially when there is a fluid overload situation rather than the thiazide or thiazide-like diuretics. Your take, Sanjay bhai and NP sir.
Truly address, thank you, Dr. NP Singh. Truly address the iatrogenic hyponatremia does exist, and it especially in elder patients where the homeostasis is not being well maintained. Number one, thiazides are really addressed, main culprits, and many of the anti-cancerous drugs are also very responsible in resulting in hyponatremia. So our physician should always carry in a mind that could it not be because of this. So now coming to Dr. Sanjay Pandey again, that he has really beautifully addressed management of hyponatremia, acute and chronic, through hypertonic saline. That's a 3% hypertonic saline. But still, there have been a lot of queries in the chat box, and many people are still not good catch it correctly. So they still want to listen to you again from the horse mouth, the hypertonic saline, how to use it, and when to use it, and how long to use it, as well as an acute and chronic management of hyponatremia, sir. Dr. Sanjay.
See, hypertonic saline is something which is a crisis management for acute hyponatremia. Now, how to use, how much to use, how long to use. So first and foremost is how much to use. Now, as I narrated, if patient is having acute symptomatic hyponatremia, then start with 100 ml of bolus. If symptoms are severe, even just finish it in 10 to 15 minutes. After that, wait for about 10 minutes or so. If symptoms are severe, repeat it, and such repetition can be done twice. So total 3 times can be given. In chat box, it is mentioned that if patient is on ventilator and patient is sick or patient is in ICU, post-operative patient who develops severe symptoms all of a sudden, such patient needs this molecule. Now, if we are not very clear that whether it is severe, very severe or not very severe, but needs symptoms are there, then instead of giving 100 ml, you can also calculate. Simple way to calculate is that 1 ml per kg body weight will increase serum sodium by 1 milliequivalent. So if we have 115 milliequivalent, usually rising serum sodium by 3 to 4 milliequivalent will make symptoms less. So if patient is not critical, suppose it is 50 kg weight and we want to increase by 4 milliequivalent, then we can say that will require 50 into 4, so 200 milliequivalent. So 200, I mean 100 ml contains 51 milliequivalent. So you will need 4 such 100 ml pint and spread it over, say, 4 to 6 hours. IV slowly, monitor it. Patient improves clinically, slow it down. But monitoring and repeating serum sodium is something which is very important, because you don't know, no equation ever works, because patient may have variable output, patient may have variable fluid intake. So whatever solution, whatever equation you use may not be that effective. So give slowly, monitor it when symptoms are not life-threatening. If symptoms are life-threatening, use bolus in short period. Second thing, that should we give continuous slow infusion or should we give bolus, monitor, again given bolus? Answer is that in 2021, there is a SALSA trial which says that when it is given continuously, the chances of overcorrection is more, and therefore rather than giving, say, continuous 3% NaCl 50 ml per hour for next 8 hours, no, give 100 ml, repeat it. After some time, give a bolus of 100 ml and monitor it. So this 2021 SALSA trial says that giving bolus periodically is safer than giving continuous infusion of 3% NaCl. So important thing is that decide how much volume should be given, give it in the bolus form, monitor it closely, and monitoring is based on 2 things, symptoms as well as serum sodium concentration. Some of the patient will have associated problems. So if serum sodium concentration after increasing even 5 milliequivalent, if symptoms does not improve, consider that it is not because of hyponatremia. There is some associated disease, and resist your temptation to give much more sodium and increase serum sodium more than 10 to 12 milliequivalent in 24 hours. So this is something which is useful while using 3% NaCl.
In fact, I would add to it that there's something which is also known as autocorrection. If your kidneys are all right, then the body is also trying to, correct the deficit which this patient has. So what is important is that he's absolutely right. I think now the dictum is to give them boluses, 100 ml of 3% saline over 2 hours, 3 hours. But in India, the problem is that to monitor patient with the serum sodium hourly is extremely, it takes you 1 hour to send the blood sample to the lab and takes around 3 to 4 hours for us to get the, the reports. So one has to rely on clinical symptoms. If the patient's on boluses, my idea would be to increase them by around 3 to 4 milliequivalent every 6 hourly, rather than waiting for 12 hours or 24 hours and increase it by 12 milli or 12 milliequivalent. So the idea is in ER, we need to do a continuous serum sodium monitoring, keep on sending the samples every hourly, as he very rightly pointed out, and look at the symptoms, monitor the patient in ICU, and give them boluses so that you can immediately, identify the improvement in the symptoms. And once the serum sodium improves by 4 to 6 milliequivalent in next 3 to 4 hours, then maybe we can slow down a bit. And as he said, that if the patient is not improving, and we've seen patients with serum sodium of 84, 90, 95, 100 also, and ultimately they all, improve. But once you know what are the principles behind treating such patients. And our adat is to start normal saline, which should be absolutely avoided. If the patient is symptomatic, if the patient has hyponatremia, straight away, irrespective of the underlying cause, give 3% saline, which is the treatment, and you can rely on boluses over a period of 1 to 2 hours. He's given you the formulas, they're very good, but I would still like to increase them by 4 milliequivalents every 4 to 6 hourly, rather than trying to achieve a target of 12 milliequivalents in 24 hours. But with continuous serum sodium monitoring, which may be extremely difficult, especially in a government setup. Yes, in a good third tertiary care hospital, you might be able to find the reports within an hour or so.
One more question, Sanjay bhai. Is this that shall we always keep the target as 120 as a correction target, or you would like to, go ahead a little bit further? Because what I remember is that, you aim to correct the sodium up to 120 milliequivalents, and then probably, as Dr. Singh sir was talking about, that if your kidneys are fine, then probably the body will also auto-correct it slowly over a period of time. So what should be the target that you should be looking at?
Yeah, most of the literature says that try to reach up to 125 milliequivalent sodium. And never try to bring it to normal.
Yes, never try.
Once it reaches to 125, it is perfect. As NP Singh sir said, 3% is perfect in an acute symptomatic patient. No formula works. Periodic monitoring. Avoid IV fluid, IV normal saline, oral fluid more intake, Vaptans. These are something which is very, very important in acute patient.
Thank you, sir. So, as you suggested that after correcting the sodium with 3% saline, if patient is not improving, suspect some other condition.
Yes.
So my next question from this
3% NaCl decreases cerebral edema, and cerebral edema is the reason for symptoms. So when say 5 milliequivalent has reduced, the symptoms is expected to improve. Sometimes it may take time. So don't try to rush fast. Monitor it, give some time, and exclude other causes.
My next question is the same this thing, that is there any clinical conditions which were associated with hyponatremia? In spite of treating hyponatremia, 3% saline, patient is not improving. What are other clinical conditions? So I request Dr. Anupam Prakash to kindly give the answer of this question.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ramchandani. And I think this question has been answered by a number of speakers already on a number of ways. I think I would just like to briefly say that, yes, we have to be careful, and it is important to understand the clinical scenario. As Dr. NP and Dr. Pandya already said, that we need to understand that everything will not be corrected by 3% saline. You need to first see whether the hyponatremia was pseudo-hyponatremia, as Dr. NP Singh very rightly said. So you need to correct those factors, because if it is pseudo-hyponatremia, it would never be corrected, whatever you may do. The thing is that you need to understand the ECF status. If it is hypervolemic types, then you actually need to restrict sodium, and you need to restrict fluids also. So you don't need to actually give anything apart from a little dose of diuretics. So you need to see the ECF status. If there is edema, then you have to have a different management. As Dr. Pandya said, you have to see which of the 3 monkeys is there. Similarly, if you have euvolemic hyponatremia, then you have to treat for SAIADH or the other 3-4 causes which Dr. Pandya showed, cerebral salt wasting and those endocrinopathies. And if at all you have a hypovolemic hyponatremia, a true hyponatremia which is there with hypovolemia, then you actually have to distinguish between whether it is a nephropathy which is there, or a renal salt wasting, or it is an extrarenal loss. So those things have to be seen. And I think I will just end it here, because these things we have to be open. And if the cause is not corrected, we actually need to see. If the cause is continuing, then whatever you may do, as Dr. NP Singh said, we have to understand there is auto correction. And apart from auto correction, there could be continuing losses also. So you are giving 3% saline on one end, but the disease is still continuing. So we need to address the main disease. That is very important.
Yeah, Girish, I would like to have your permission to leave. I have a call from the hospital. So if you permit, I would like to have your permission. I'm sorry, I had to leave a little early.
Dr. Mangesh, there's one question. In case you can
Okay.
have 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just for the final, and then probably we have been talking a lot about normal saline, 3% saline, but still, do you find there's some place of normal saline in management? Otherwise, once you corrected hyponatremia, so what could be the further guidelines if the patient is not in a mood to have an oral intake? Do we have some place of a normal saline otherwise?
No, as a matter of fact, Sanjay Bhai would definitely agree to me that there are only probably hypovolemic hyponatremia may have over a period of time may have a role for a normal saline. Otherwise, generally no, preferably. And as Dr. Singh also, sir, has
there is one more place for normal saline other than hypovolemic hyponatremia, is to differentiate between SIADH and cerebral salt wasting syndrome.
Yes.
See, this is the situation where both are euvolemic, both will have hyponatremia, both will have hypouricemia, both will occur in neurological status.
Correct.
But SIADH after normal saline will have low sodium, while cerebral salt wasting syndrome is a salt losing underlying problem, and that will get corrected with normal saline. So if we want to differentiate between two, then you can use a saline challenge, and that is the other area where in hyponatremia we use saline.
Perfect.
Truly said, beautiful. So
thank you, Mangesh.
Thank you, Dr. Mangesh. We understand your medical emergencies.
Thank you so much.
Here is more demanding.
Bye, sir. Bye, Sanjay Bhai.
Rather than hospital.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Good
you
night, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
It's great to you, sir. So now we're coming to addressing to Dr. NP Singh, sir. And here the point is what are your views on managing hyponatremias? We have learned, discussed, but still we have to have multiple approach to pinpoint. What are your views on managing hyponatremias?
I will look at the situation and the patient. There are three ways by which a patient can come to me with hyponatremia. The commonest way is patient comes to my OPD, is a known case of depression, has been hypertensive, and his serum sodium level is, let's say, 128, 130 milligrammes. By and large, the patient is asymptomatic. That is one situation. Second is I get a referral by my colleague that the patient has to undergo a surgery, or patient has a serum admitted in the hospital and his serum sodium is, let's say, a bit low. And third would be, as has been alluded to repeatedly, is an emergency where the patient comes to with severe hyponatremia. In the first setting, most of these times, the patients, I would look at the list of the drug which the patient is. I would also look at I will ask about the patient about what is his water, what is his or more likely her water intake. Many of these patients, though we agree that if the kidneys are normal, if we drink a lot of water, then the water promptly gets treated in polycythemia syndromes. But sometimes when you have a hypertension, when you have a mild, chronic kidney disease, or when the patient is on diuretics, or when the patient has been on SIDH and has an SIDH secondary to a list of drugs which I alluded to, then these patients may in fact improve a lot just on counseling, advising them not to take plenty of fluid, restricting the fluid, and also a type of patients who have underlying heart disease or a cirrhosis that I'll allude to in the second instance. So counseling the patient, asking them to restrict the fluid can have a substantial benefit of improving the serum sodium level. And I would like to follow them up regularly. I would like to counsel them for prevention of falls. And I would like to tell them about what are these drugs which can cause. Occasionally these patients may be benefited with an increased amount of salt or along with the combination of diuretics, but that is much more effective in patients who are having a heart failure or cirrhosis. The third and most important thing is that these patients may benefit after the significant water restriction, may benefit from belpectins, as was being alluded to by Dr. Sai. Second group of patients are the ones who are admitted in the ward who have a comorbidity, which is a huge combination of chronic kidney disease, a heart failure, a cirrhosis also, and has a edematous state, has a serum sodium which is a bit lower. Now, which is again, as I said, which is a volume overload state. One has to restrict fluid, take the help of a diuretics. We in the ward have a tendency to give a combination of salt restriction, fluid restriction, giving them extra salt, but not alone, but adding furosemide along with it. But these patients may also benefit from, after restricting the fluid and adding an extra salt, maybe accuratic, that is belpectin. There's some indication. And of course, in acute state, I would like to first assess the symptoms. Patient symptomatic, admit the patient, give bolus of saline, continue to monitor the patients. Once the serum sodium increases by 4 to 6 milliequivalent, reduce the boluses, maybe start on infusion gradually, but monitor. And once the serum sodium goes to 125, stop everything, let the body autocorrect. Or if the patient is mildly symptomatic, has a severe hyponatremia, again admit, treat the patient with boluses and gradually taper off. So the dictum here is, please try to find out the underlying cause. These patients can have severe hypothyroidism and have some other cause for dehydrated state. So there can be, in one patient, there can be all the full book of Dr. Sanjay Pandya being attributed to. So try to understand the patient, try to understand urinary sodium. Now again, a very important component of our management, but then when you give diuretics in acute setting, urinary sodium can be high. In SIDH also, urinary sodium can be high. If the patient is on a long-term diuretics, then the urinary sodium may be low. So one has to actually look at the clinical scenario, the patient psyche, the drugs which the patient is taking, and also examining the patient, which is now becoming rare in COVID era especially, and finally deciding on which is the best way to go about. But the clarity has been very clearly given by Dr. Sanjay that if the patient is symptomatic, acute, treat with bolus, irrespective of underlying cause. If the patient is chronic, hold on, talk to the patient, counsel the patient, restrict the fluid, and then maybe either an extra salt with diuretics or a well. I think this is what my dictum would be.
Thank you, Dr. N.P. Singh. I think we had a wonderful discussion. It's time to conclude. I invite Dr. K.K. Parikh, sir, for his concluding remark. Sir, please unmute yourself. I think you're not audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay Pandya, for explaining each and everything so nicely, beautifully, and our all three panelists who have given so good explanation for everything which has been asked, so nicely explained each and everything. I think we cannot become wise just with one, but I think to a great extent, we have been updated our knowledge about hyponatremia and other things. So thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay Pandya, for sparing your valuable time, and all the panelists so actively interacting with all the panelists. Thank you so much. We had a great interaction, great lecture by Dr. Sanjay Pandya. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you again, Dr. Parikh and Dr. Mathur, for giving
Thank
Dr.
you, sir.
Mangesh, Dr. Pradyuman, Dr. Ramchandani, Dr. Girish. Thank you, sir. Dr. Sanjay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you
Thank
all.
you, sir.
Thank you.
I would like to
Mathur,
take the
sir.
privilege to extend my sincere thanks to our mentor, Dr. K.K. Parikh, sir, Dr. Y.P. Unjal, sir, Dr. B.B. Thakur, Dr. Kamlesh Tiwari, our Dean, Dr. Rajesh Upadhyay, our esteemed speaker, Dr. Sanjay Pandya, who was really wonderful, our chairpersons, Dr. Jyotirmay Paul, Dr. Panaliyappan, our esteemed panelists, Dr. N.P. Singh, Dr. Anupam Prakash, Dr. Mangesh Tivaskar. We really enjoyed the evening. My sincere thanks to Dr. Ramchandani and Dr. Pradyuman Sharma for moderating the event in excellent way. I am thankful to all the audiences for their valuable presence and sparing their time. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Recording,
sir.
night, sir. Good night, sir. Good night.
send the recording to all the delegates and all the speakers. Recording is, I think we recorded this session. So anybody who is required, I think kindly contact me or Dr. Girish so we can send the recording to all of you. Thank you once again, sir.